Welcome, everyone. This is the live virtual roundtable event where we'll discuss hiring and retention in a pre-recession, post-pandemic market. I'm your moderator, Douglas Brown, CEO at Halo Consulting, a certified minority-owned search firm based in Chicago. We bring the process-oriented best practices our team developed at top executive search firms with a cost-conscious scrappiness you'd expect from a boutique or startup. Halo hosts monthly virtual roundtable events like this one for HR and technology leaders on a variety of topics, and we look forward to seeing you at future Halo events. This event is being recorded, and feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A function, and we'll address those questions throughout the event. We will be sharing a survey to gather your feedback, and we will post a recorded version of this event to YouTube. Today, we are joined by a great group of passionate HR and talent acquisition leaders. We will want this to be an interactive event, so please ask questions, and we can start off by sharing where everyone is tuning in from. First, I'd like to introduce Luke Kauffman, currently the Director of Talent Acquisition at Reltio, a software company focused on the data management space. Luke has 14 years of HR and talent acquisition experience at both Fortune 500 companies and startups, and is passionate about hiring A+ talent and creating programs to keep talent engaged, motivated, and retained. Thank you for joining us, Luke. Our next panelist is David Loiselle. David is a 20-year HR executive who has worked with both large public companies and VC and PE-funded high-growth tech firms. Most recently, David led the people team at the hyper-growth supply chain technology firm Project 44, growing the global team from 300 to 1,300 employees in 18 months. He also runs LoHigh Talent Consulting, which focuses on delivering the right people processes for small to mid-sized companies to achieve their business objectives through their people. We're excited to have you, David. Our final panelist joining us today, Annette Snyder. Annette is the General Manager of Human Resources for North America at Icertis, a B2B AI-powered contract lifecycle management platform that ensures compliance and minimizes risk. Annette comes with 30 years of experience as an HR professional and has worked mostly in the tech industry, but has also worked in the professional sports and beverage industries. Annette has a strong mix of startup and large company experience. We're happy to have you, Annette.
Hi.
Unfortunately, Stephanie Roseman is unable to join us today due to personal obligations. But let's go ahead and get started with our first question. So according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, a record 4.5 million Americans quit their jobs in November of 2021. Let's discuss the challenges, approaches, and success stories of retaining top talent. Annette, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, Doug. I believe it's very important to prepare and educate your leaders and managers on the lessons we learned during the dot-com era. You know, this time of great resignation also happened 20 years ago, right at the end of the heyday of the dot-com time. People were changing jobs every 6 months. They were getting 1 to 2 level promotions with huge increases. And we started seeing this happen all over again last year due to the effects of the pandemic. There became a labor shortage because people that lost their jobs due to the pandemic over the last 2 years, they figured out different ways to monetize their lives. And those individuals don't have to go back to working for a company, which creates a smaller talent pool for, you know, those of us who are HR at companies have to recruit from. So there are some lessons that I think we can take away from that dot-com era. I think one of them is if you adopt a short-term view, engaging in that bidding war for talent, you risk building a payroll that the company cannot sustain long-term. And that results in hiring freezes and layoffs, which we're seeing with many companies today.
Yeah, I'll kind of second some of what Annette said, specifically around the management piece. I think there's a lot of ways to approach retention, and different times may call for different strategies. I'll key in on two that I think should probably make everyone's list. First of all is to really listen to your team. I think at a minimum, completing kind of regular surveys and then setting out short-term action plans to meet the needs of your team is critically important. I do think it's important to set your employee experience or value proposition as an organization, but what you do to deliver on that value proposition and deliver on the expectations of your employees can change both as the macro environment changes, and it seems like the macro environment's changing every 6 months or so these days, but certainly as your workforce turns over, as you bring on new people into the organization, you have to be really active in listening and learning to what they need and what they're looking for to deliver on your employee experience. I think the second key strategy that can't be overlooked is really that investing in managers. Specifically, if you now have any sort of hybrid or remote workforce, you may have heard of the new term floating around called quiet quitting. I don't think it's necessarily a new concept. It's just rebranded. A management development firm that I'm on an advisory committee with recently did a great study that dug into the correlation between specific management skills and engagement and disengagement of team members. And really, quitting has been around for a long time, but this new name, quiet quitting, is really no more than employee disengagement. So, disengagement of employees can certainly create challenges for other people sitting next to them and how they're engaged in their work. The employee suffers from, doing work that they may not feel passionate about. So solving this employee engagement problem isn't just an HR responsibility. There's a primary responsibility that lies on that manager, and developing and investing in your managers to build skills, specifically the study found to build skills around providing clarity and context to employees, providing an environment of psychological safety, allowing people to really kind of be themselves, providing purpose in the work and that individuals are doing, being there to support and coach team members and give them real feedback with empathy and a caring attitude. Finding a way for managers to be an advocate for getting appropriate compensation for work and not allowing compensation to not keep up with the market. And then finally, having managers lead the opportunities for growth, learning, and development. And those are skills that not a lot of managers have innately or maybe even been developed on. So I think investing in managers is a good way to address the maybe looming departure of team members.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. Thanks, David. I kind of have a little bit of a unique view because I'm at a startup, a growth company, and about 450 employees. And a lot of the talent that we're securing and interviewing are quote unquote kind of subject matter experts, right? They're account executive, they're machine learning engineers, folks in customer success where, I would say at least half of the time when we give them an offer, they have 2 or 3 other offers. So the game has completely changed. But I think one interesting aspect is, and I know personally, I've had to pivot my management style in the past couple of years. Every one of my teammates and everyone at the company, they're sitting at a computer for 12 hours a day, staring at the screen. And I think you have to really be cognizant of that and create a culture experience that's engaging off of that. And like you said, David, there's so many things from a retention experience perspective, but I actually think one of the most important ones, which you hit on, was the hiring manager and team relationship. We're finding that from just a retention top performer perspective, the leaders that are the best just get them not only the most out of their team, but have the lowest attrition rates. So that certainly has been pretty important. But I think just looking at that culture experience, thinking about mental health and recognition and providing programs according to that. And I think development is huge. The top talent, I've been saying this for a while, there's definitely, they don't have the loyalty they had 15, 20 years ago. So if someone calls them up and offers them more money and more equity in the company, they're more likely to leave. So I think you really have to care about your team, create growth plans for your team. And that takes a lot of effort, right? And there's a big EQ aspect to that, but you really have to care about your team and create growth plans for them. And I know from a talent acquisition perspective, we're consistently monitoring the performance review process to look at that high potential talent and talent that's potentially ready for a change, who's performing well, to understand where we could potentially promote them internally and give them new opportunities. So it's a really funky market right now. But I think, just the culture experience, people are at home, they have kids, my dog's in the background right now, and just being cautious of what their experience is like and providing programs off of that to drive retention, and then caring about your team and developing programs for them to grow.
Thanks, Luke and David. Annette, you touched on the importance of preparing hiring managers on how to address employees leaving their current job and role. What approaches has the Icertis team prepared their hiring managers in the case of employees resigning?
Yeah, so I think that the first lesson is don't wait until they resign. Get ahead of that. And I think David and Luke both said this, right? Is like listen to your employees and look at your data. Look at that attrition data and find out what are those top reasons why people are leaving your company. It's not always compensation. A lot of times you'll find that it's either a work-life balance or it's a career development. And so listening to your employees and kind of getting ahead of that curve. Don't wait till they resign, but really engage early on. I don't think any company does this, 100% perfect all the time, but it's about that continual improvement and continuing to listen and grow as a company.
Great, thanks, Annette. And this is a good segue into our next question. In today's market, employees are leaving for better compensation, being uncomfortable with COVID-19 policies, needing a change, a better work-life balance, and better benefits. How has the conversation shifted with senior leadership to focus on improving the overall employee experience? David, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Douglas. I do think that the list of kind of possible areas of focus that you mentioned is a bit misleading. It is comprehensive, but I think thinking that these factors will cause employees to leave actually can create fear and inaction in organizations who want to address the employee experience and employee expectations. There's different reasons why individuals might leave. There's different drivers within different organizations, larger companies, smaller companies, different industries. So one size doesn't really fit all. So my thought around that is, what do you need to do to address the employee experience and hoping to, keep people from leaving when there's so many different ways you could be focusing on that. And I think it goes back to kind of identifying what you need to do as an organization. Get back to listening, but also being honest about what your business can do. So thinking about things like, what does your compensation philosophy need to be? And I say need to be, what does it need to be both from a budgetary perspective, but also from a taking care of the right talent? You have to ask and answer that question before you can set your strategy. What can your business support related to flexible work? Right now, the media will tell you that every business that's going to succeed has to offer super flexible work arrangements. But if your business can't drive its business with that, how can you set the expectation correctly? So once you kind of identify those factors, then setting that framework for your desired employee experience and building it into every aspect, starting with hiring, being clear and transparent about who you are, work that into the onboarding so that you show the experience in the first 90 days, work that into the different engagement activities that you are providing for your team, into manager development so that they're walking the talk, and then showing how that employee experience can drive career growth. Ultimately, you'll want to have it into each aspect of the employee life cycle, or you'll be delivering an experience that people aren't looking for, and then risk losing them. So if you can promise someone, or at least do your best to promise someone upfront in the recruiting process what that experience will be, and then deliver on that, you're much more likely to get them engaged and retained. I will say, listening to your people and responding on an ongoing basis versus what you hear from the media as those drivers is probably just a little sidebar conversation.
Yeah, I'll just add just one thing. This is actually kind of an interesting question. I think we're at the highest quit rate in since the government started measuring it. And people have been kind of working really hard and living to work for a long time. And I think they're at this pause where, and I just went through it personally, is, do I want to do this anymore? Right? I'm working 50, 60 hours a week. My health isn't great. I got this going on personally. So I think, and David talked a little bit about it. I've personally gone to leadership before and said, hey, we should, try some flexible PTO days. We need some mental health initiatives. And their first question is, where's the data, right? As we all know. And for us, I mean, our attrition's actually, or excuse me, our attrition's pretty low. So it's hard to sell that sometimes. So I think you need to have a leadership team. It helps you if they're open to listening to these initiatives. But that can be a challenge. We do a weekly NPS survey in the company here after our stand-up about, hey, how things are going, any feedback you have. And employees have started to chime in on that. And, we have been able to help with, flexible PTO days, shift some meetings around to allow people with kids to attend a later session meeting. But this can be challenging, in my opinion, if you have leaders who are just focused on the data and sometimes miss that non-data oriented initiative. But it just, having employees respond and give their feedback is helpful for sure.
Yeah, I will tack on to that, Luke, and really tying back to what David was saying as well, is that listening to your employees, at Icertis, the employee experience is really critical for us. It's something that we spend a lot of time, thinking about and working on. We do focus groups throughout the year, throughout the country, the globe, actually. We do them all around the world. And it's not a one and done. Like we expect those focus groups to happen at least quarterly on an ongoing basis. And we end up tying everything back to really the cornerstones of our culture, which are our forte values and the 4 rings of responsibility, which really tell employees, how do you prioritize yourself? Take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your community, and then take care of work. And it just empowers them to seek what that balance looks like for themselves and what works for them. I think David said this, you really have to focus on what works for you and your company, and having those cornerstones of your culture and making sure that your programs, all tie back to that. So, it's about walking the talk and saying, well, we have this new policy coming out, but, does it represent our culture and our core values, what we stand and believe in? So really be consistent about that messaging, not only while you're onboarding or recruiting, but throughout that entire life cycle. And even if, employees do decide to leave, then you can also, if they leave with respect, then you can have a robust alumni program. And we're finding that we're getting a lot of boomerangs coming back as well. People have left but are coming back because they really enjoyed, their time with Icertis. So, I think we've all said it. Listen to your employees.
A follow-up question for our panelists. So listening to your employees is hyper important, if it's by focus groups or employee surveys. How do you garner buy-in and really start the conversation with senior leadership if they take a more conservative approach to improving their overall employee experience?
I'll chime in a little bit here. Luke, you had mentioned the important in alignment, and data is often a way in which you can kind of drive decision making, and we also know data can be skewed to tell a story that you want it to be, or someone wants it to be skewed towards. I think that data can also come from a little bit more of anecdotal information, and so around the idea of what are we hearing from our people in order to make decisions. And Annette had kind of put it pretty clearly as to if we are having low turnover right now and we're happy with the retention of our team members, but we're hearing that they're feeling overworked, or they're feeling lack of communication, or they're feeling, their benefits are not up to par. We're hearing that information by listening and by surveying. We should be responding using that data, even though it's a smaller segment, to respond to create a ongoing improvement in the environment versus just waiting for attrition to suddenly spike, where you then have to be reactive in solving the problem. So getting ahead of it.
Yeah, and I've had CEOs before that just totally get it. Hey, we need to implement this mental health initiative. Yeah, I get it. Go for it. But then I have other leaders where they want to see the data, and I always try to create a solution that ties back to cost to the business. So for an example, hey, if you have 20% turnover in sales, this is going to affect the revenue that ultimately is tied to the budget and to growth. So that's a really simple example, but with the tougher leaders who want to see data, you do have to create a story. But I always try to tie it back to growth and how it affects the business outcomes.
Great. Thanks, Luke and David. It looks like we had our first question come in from the Q&A. And Annette, this is a question for you. Why do you think people don't have to go back to their regular job? What are they doing today? How are they paying their bills? I feel like understanding this and what they are getting from their new endeavors can be helpful to attracting them back to a job they will like.
So the trends I've been seeing really are the different ways they're monetizing. You know, a lot of people have jumped into the influencer YouTube. They're getting, if you look on YouTube, actually, there's people who have grown exponentially in subscribers in very short periods of time because they're focusing on areas that are really popular, and so they get even millions of subscribers very, very quickly. And then that translates into contracts, like sponsorship contracts, which is another source of revenue. So the people who are doing really well actually have multiple revenue streams, right? So it's not only monetization on maybe a social media channel, but it's also sponsorship contracts and other things. So they've got, it's the idea of the side hustle, right? And I see many people that have 2 or 3 side gigs going on that are multiple streams of revenue that are really helping them monetize their lives. So how do you get them back? I think flexibility is key. One of the things that most of them talk about is, why would I go work for a company that I have to work, I think David said it, 10 to 12 hours a day sitting in front of a computer, when I can do this on my own schedule wherever I want to do it. I can go on vacation and do my video or my streaming, and it affords them to live the lifestyle that they want to live. Not all of them are millionaires. Some of them are just, making enough, but it's that work-life balance that makes the difference for them.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the number of even kind of individual contributors, but have a specialty skill, who have been able to create a side hustle out of that. And I think of people that I've worked with recently who were, individual contributor data scientists, typically would need a outlet for using that skill set, and they're now finding multiple outlets for using that skill set, and are really enjoying being a subject matter expert, not only to their employer, but to the world. And a lot of people are able to leverage technology and leverage, people's desire for information and growth in a way that they can monetize, or at least, work on their passion. So how do you become a complementary partner to that lifestyle? And 2 years ago, I worked for an organization that had these very specific non-compete clauses in your employment agreements that included kind of like restrictions against the side hustle, we'll call it, and that had to be broken down as we were starting to lose talent who said, hey, I still want to be on this advisory board for this nonprofit association, but your terms say I shouldn't do that. We had to flex the arrangements of how we employ people that, especially that have certain specialty skills.
Yeah, there are platforms that actually cater to the side hustle, right? You can sign up on a platform and people just have contract jobs and posted there, and people go and get contract work very easily that way. So they're not having to go out and hustle it themselves.
Great. Thanks, Annette. Thanks, David. So this has been a great discussion up to this point, and would like to keep the conversation going with our next question. With the uncertainty in the market today, we've seen many organizations rethink their talent strategy for the remainder of the year and going into 2023. What talent management strategies should HR executives be keeping top of mind when discussing future growth? Annette, what's been your approach so far?
Sure. I think we've always kind of had a two-pronged approach. It's the what's that immediate goals that, of course, the board and our executive team strategy wants us to achieve. But from a talent strategy, we're also looking at that long term, because you have to bring in multiple factors. There's, the macroeconomics of what's going on in the world, as well as what's that labor market doing. So you've got a couple of different areas where you really have to focus. So at Icertis, we continue to focus on growth, but we've opted to stay the course with our longer view talent strategy. We prepare our leaders for those longer recruit leading times, efficient in interviewing and offer processes, so we're not taking a long time getting an offer out the door. We look for talent outside of the highly competitive geography hubs like Silicon Valley. There's lots of really great talent all the way, all across the country. There's also a focus on retaining talent and career development. How can we grow those skills from within? If you have if you know what your skills are that you need, 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, then you can grow your talent from within and not always have to go out to the market to buy that. So we pay attention to, what the market's doing, and we stay focused on what's the right thing for our company to do. I think fiscal responsibility always becomes key, even though it's the harder strategy to execute. It's easy to throw money at things to make the problem go away. But if you can maintain your fiscal responsibility, I think you have a more stable workforce in the end. I think while employee retention is really critical, that quick response, like I said, is maybe to give more money, but in employee retention, cash is actually the least retentive of the tools that you could offer. So listening to your employees and why are they actually leaving? If it's just for more money, there's always going to be a company that will pay more money. But if they're leaving for other things like work-life balance or career development, really listen to those things.
Thanks, Annette. I looked at this question. The first part of it, I think, was critical. With the uncertainty in today's market, that kind of changes the way we think about affirmation of what the right talent strategy is. This isn't probably a traditional demand-driven down cycle that we're potentially going into. There was 15 years of digital disruption that allowed these opportunities that we kind of just spoke about. Then you accelerate all that by this pandemic that changed the behaviors of much of the workforce. Companies are beginning to start figuring out that rather than just laying off people, of course, some tech companies probably did vastly overhire. What we need to start thinking about is how do we redeploy our people into new roles, into new experiences, as our business probably shifted pretty rapidly. So topics like reskilling, career mobility, having a talent marketplace, being organizationally agile are now these really important high-level topics. It's not just about kind of retraining workers, but it's transforming the way people work and the tools that they have. So I was just reading an article by Josh Burson that I thought was pretty on point with this topic. And he talks about how, although we are in an economic downturn, CEOs and CHROs are conflicted by kind of what this means and how to respond to that, because it feels like we need to continue to hire to drive the business that we're in right now. So his recommendation, which I really liked, is taking a fresh look of talent strategy and is redesign this talent system where you look to recruit, reskill, retain, and then redesign all at once. And so keeping that agile platform, not just recruit and set it and forget it, but recruit, be ready to reskill, use that to retain folks, and then redesign your organization to keep that workflow moving. I found was a pretty fresh take. So listen, this is a healthy thing, the fact that we're evolving as an economy, but we've got to be ready to evolve with it, and how we manage our talent and how we keep people focused on the business.
Yeah, I'll just add two quick things. We were one of those tech companies that hired a lot really quick. It was crazy last year. I mean, we hired 5x prior to the year before. And now we're starting to talk about, are we hiring the right people to drive the business? Which, of course, when I said it a year and a half ago, they didn't listen. You know how it is. But we're looking at the people who are performing well. We're pivoting our business strategy to a little bit more of like a market-driven strategy. So we're starting to look at the right, instead of hiring 100 people, can we hire 60 really good talent to drive the business? So we're starting to be a little bit more economical about our strategy. And I would also say, I think you have to look at your site strategy too, where your people are located in the business. Cost, I think, is going to be something that is beginning to bubble up a little bit more in the next, 6 to 12 months. So I think you need to look at where are your employees around the world, and do you have the right strategy to drive the business?
Follow-up question for our panelists. With the major shift in the talent management philosophy being heavily focused on the long game, what challenges does the group foresee in the next 18 to 36 months, and how will it affect the bottom line?
Reread that.
Start with that. Yeah, I was going to say where to start with that one.
Didn't see it written down here. Can you reread that? I just want to make sure I.
Yeah. So the question is, with the major shift in talent management philosophy being heavily focused on the long game, what challenges does the group foresee in the next 18 to 36 months, and how will it affect the bottom line?
Well, I think kind of to what we were just speaking about, where over the past, I'll call it past 18 months, many businesses were hiring to either keep up with demand or hiring quickly, just due to the talent availability. There were probably more short-term solutions initiated, but that also changed the process: how we hire, who we hire, how we onboard, how we engage our new people, was systematically changed over the past 2 years, and now reshifting the way in which we operate to think a little more long-term, to look towards driving results in the business for our people, not just today, but tomorrow and down the road. I think it's almost a structural reshift, kind of back to how we maybe are operating in a little more stable environment, but certainly with some unknowns of how the market's going to shift.
Yeah, I would add on to that, David, that I think it depends on where the company is in their life cycle also. So like Luke is at a startup, we're at a pre-IPO stage, although, a little bit older and more mature than I think Luke's company. So when you're early stage startup, it's really about growth, grow fast, right? And if you're well funded, you really don't have to pay too much attention. You can have a shorter view. You can, money isn't necessarily the thing that you're paying the most attention to. It's like, yeah, we have enough funds, just go get the growth. I think as you mature and grow as a company, that fiscal responsibility starts creeping back, in, and you have to really take a look at all those things that you were talking about, and you start moving towards that longer view game. And I think the companies who have an eye on that fiscal responsibility early on, and not letting it get certainly if your strategy is just to grow fast, don't slow that down, but certainly just having an eye for it and kind of keeping it out there in your ecosystem, and you'll be ahead of the game once, through these market changes that can be very volatile.
Yeah, I wonder, is it going to be employee productivity and burnout? The world's in a funky place right now. You have the economy's unknown. You have a lot of geopolitical tensions, and we're in almost year 2 of this COVID thing. So, this constant go, produce metrics. I just wonder, will that start to wear employees out? So I would probably be sensitive to employer productivity and burnout.
Great.
Hey, this is a little bit off. I read an interesting summary of a CEO responding to quiet quitting. Again, going back to that and how it's driving me nuts. I'd like to just read it. I just pulled it up real quick. It says, no one will ever care about the business as much as the people who founded it, or highly paid executives with lots of equity, as it should be. My advice to SaaS leaders is make business tools that are making business tools It might not inspire everyone the way curing cancer does. Make peace with this. Run the business with the assumption that everyone will show up and do enough. Not everyone is going to work as hard as the CEO. If you want a workforce that's inspired and wants to go above and beyond, pay them well, build a culture where vacations are encouraged, and true disconnection is the normal. Hire for potential, give people a shot, invest in their aspirations, be interested in their personal goals, allow them make mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. So, the idea that we can just drive everyone as much of as a founding CEO is driven each and every day and passionate about that might be a little bit of a foolish assumption moving forward.
Great. Thanks, David and Luke. Up to this point, we've covered talent management strategies, employee experience, and approaches to retaining top talent. Today, it seems that many companies can no longer rely on hiring a duplicate profile to replace an open position. McKinsey recently released a report where they surveyed 13,000 employees across 6 countries. 65% of respondents who quit their jobs in the 2 years since the start of the pandemic did not return to the same industry, implying that the talent left to hire are outside the typical box. How are you adjusting your hiring strategy to adapt to a labor market that might not yield the same kind of apples to apples or one-to-one candidates for open positions? Luke, do you mind sharing your
Yeah, sure. I could probably talk about this all day, by the way, but just a couple metrics and I'll dive into some solutions. So we look at offer rejections, why people turn us down. And I would say probably about somewhere in the 18 to 20% range last year of our turn downs. We would give someone an offer and they would say, you know what, like, I don't love my job, but I got a lot of other stuff going on in my life and I don't want to add a new job on top of it. So it's not worth me making an extra $10,000 to $20,000 to switch jobs and go through that whole new thing again. That was about 18 to 20% of our offer rejections. I've never seen that before. So I think what's happening, and I told my team this today, is I think there's so much parity across the job market. Like an account executive at our company is similar to Salesforce, or VP of marketing is similar at our company to Microsoft. They're kind of the same type of job in theory, right? Driving leads, driving demand gen, driving sales. So with that, I've kind of pivoted a couple of things in our talent acquisition function. The first one is I actually changed the recruiter profile. So typically in the past, you want a recruiter who can source, drive great leads. I've pivoted a lot more to a relationship-based recruiter. I was on the phone with someone yesterday talking to her 20 minutes about music, right? So what I'm trying to do, and this is strategic, is I'm hoping that I'm going to give her the best experience, most personal experience, and she's going to come work for us versus the other 2 recruiters. So I've changed the profile of the recruiter, someone who can sell the story, has really good temperament, really good EQ, who can just build a great relationship with the candidate. I think it's really important. It's a competitive advantage. The other piece is just the interview experience. I'm trying to push our company away from this 4 or 5 step process. It is exhausting for the candidate. And then they're in the process for 30 days. So we look at how long a candidate's in the interview cycle. Historically, we've been about 30 days from, I found someone great to offer. We're trying to get that down to 21 max. But we're trying to be really creative about how we interview the talent. So for an example, it's really hard to find engineers. And I'm hoping we can test out a solution where we actually just do a hackathon for engineering talent, and we create a unique solution around that. So we're trying different things to make the interview experience engaging and fun. And it includes a lot of time with the hiring manager. So we have hiring manager a lot of time texting, calling, emailing the candidate. Right. So we're pivoting to relationship-based recruiter. Let's get the candidate with the hiring manager a lot. Let's make it like a fun experience. And then the third one, which is the hardest to sell to leaders, is we're trying to encourage leader to hire for passion and culture fit versus exact experience. That is a hard sell. I'm going to raise my hand and say it's a hard sell, especially as you hire for more experienced roles. But hitting on some of that offer rejection, data, we think that more likely to get offer acceptances and higher performance if someone's passionate about the work and they're a really good culture fit. But that is a hard sell to leaders sometimes because they have functions to run, they have strategies to run. So those are a couple changes I've made, and we're seeing some good results. But every day I feel like it changes, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Luke, you hit on something interesting. Your offer, your reason for rejections, that high percentage, it makes me think about how a team member or an applicant almost needs to be drawn to the opportunity in the right way. And maybe it's a unique way than it would have been 2 years ago, where people were looking for like jobs. And they're saying, here's my resume, here's my skills. They match up with that. Let's pair them together. People are looking for either a new experience or even doing something new. And so the differentiators that you can make during the applicant experience, and then certainly during the employee experience, is going to be one way to get them there. But I think we don't want to overlook the opportunity to bring in people at different levels into new careers. Someone who maybe was a very successful, software engineer that wants to start selling a product, I'm just making that up, might not be able to come right into an account executive role, but might want to come into a different level role. I worked for a Vista Equity Portco a couple of years ago, and they had a really strong way about going through job architecture and job leveling to make sure that there were opportunities at entry level for kind of key growth jobs. And so you would have 3 to 4 roles within every organization that had very, very clear steps from you've never done this job before, there's still a place here for you, and in 18 months you'll be able to go here, here, and here. And that just allowed different talent profiles to enter that career path without specific experience or resume experience, but yet maybe had the desire and the aptitude to achieve great things in that type of role. So I think kind of creating those opportunities through not requiring a like for like resume is a way of tackling the not apples to apples candidate preference anymore.
Yeah, I think I'd like to jump in there. I think 2 things. One, Luke, you talked about, that being a hard sell about the culture interview. We actually have one person in every interview loop that only does a culture interview and is looking for cultural fit. And we talk about the pillars of our culture and do just really a deep dive on that. And I think that's really, really critical, because now you're looking at, is this person going to be a good fit within our, not only can they do the job, but are they going to be a good fit, for our company? So I think that's really critical. And David, what you just said about looking at that, almost that second career for some people, maybe they were very successful and then now they're changing. We kind of see this as like mid-year second career bias almost, where they haven't fit this particular path. But when you work in industries like, for example, when I was in professional sports and then I went back to tech, you see, I look at the alumni, from a sports team, and they had doctors, they had CPAs and financial advisors, and it was just when we had the alumni dinners, it was just a real mix of people who went on to have these really great successful careers after they got done playing their sport. So to try to eliminate that mid-year, second year career bias, I think is really critical.
Great. Thanks, Annette. We do have a time for a couple more questions, and feel free to drop questions into the Q&A function. The next question will cover the pre-recession and post-pandemic environment has put an increasing pressure on managers to performance manage the dead weight. How are companies adjusting to maximize every dollar spent on employee compensation? David, what successful approaches have you seen from your perspective?
Yeah, I tell you, in the past 2 years, I've become a little disappointed in what it feels like a departure of goal setting. 10 years ago or so, we expanded past SMART goals and started to connect the work that people did to business objectives through, KPRs, OKRs, MBOs, or whatever framework. I feel like many companies, it feels like only senior managers are being held accountable for delivering results based on specific goals and targets outside of revenue generators, of course. So my recommendation would be to really drive goal setting into as many levels of your organization as possible. Find the framework that works for your business type. You might need a more flexible framework that allows resetting of goals on a quarterly basis. You might be more targeted, where you're able to set 12 months goals and measure performance throughout the course of the year to use using those targets. But I think, going back to my earlier point, enabling managers to do this is key. It can't live as an HR program. And so I'd frankly like to see, really thoughtful goal setting be cascaded a little bit more consistently, so people understand what their targets are and have an opportunity to achieve them and be measured on that base versus more of an arbitrary evaluation.
Yeah, I have kind of just two comments. I hate the term dead weight, by the way, because I always feel like here's this poor employee who's probably never been coached.
It hurts me to read that too.
Oh, but I understand the question. But I think there, with manager and leaders, there needs to be a lot of accountability to coaching your team. I think that's really, really important. I spend sometimes 70% of my week doing that. And just I'm a Philly guy, so I take the Sixers quote, Doc Rivers, but he says, I'm going to coach you to who you should be, but not who you are. So I really believe in this like consistent coaching culture. So I think having some type of culture where and having some L&D on it and how to coach employees and how to develop them is really, really important. I could argue that maybe the number one HR program in the whole company. But and I think Annette or David said it before, is some managers just really don't know how to do that. They're really poor at it. So I think that's important. And I know for us, with if we're opening up a new role or we're promoting someone, those conversations actually go through exec staff now to manage costs, because we're just being a little bit sensitive too. But yeah, the dead weight, I always think of this poor employee who probably never had a coaching conversation in 2 years. We all know who they are. But I think there needs to be a lot of accountability on the leader to actually develop that performance plan.
Yeah, ask the question, whose fault is it that this person is being deemed dead weight? And it's not always the manager. Sometimes it's the organization who has not, set them up for success. Sometimes it's the manager. Sometimes it's the individual. But don't overlook what might be the root problem.
Yeah, I think continual performance discussions, it can really be key there, right? So those companies who are staying on top of performance management and Luke, or no, I think it was David, said with the recruit, reskill, retain, and redesign, right? You're staying on top of that, and it becomes this evolving part of your culture just throughout your entire life cycle. It prevents you from, growing this large pool of employees now that you consider, ineffective, or I too also hate the dead weight term, but that they're expendable and that you lay them off. I think if you're really doing the work all along, that number really grows very, very small, and you don't have a big hit to your workforce. Whereas, it's just day-to-day management, right? It's just grooming and coaching all along.
It looks like we had a question come in from the Q&A. And the question, I will post this in the chat for the group to see. How valuable do you feel succession planning plays into recruiting, retaining, and retraining?
I think it's critical. We're just getting ready to kick it off for this year in our organization. Not only succession planning, but also replacement planning. So if you have someone in a role, doesn't have to be an executive role, it could just be a critical role where if something, happens to that person, they fall ill or something happens to them and they can't return to work right away, who's that immediate person that can step in maybe for the short term while you get that longer term solution into place? This happened to me last year, actually, and I had to step in for someone. So I think it's both succession planning, which is that long-term, you're developing people into being your successor, and also the replacement planning. And that should be looked at every year. I think it's really critical.
Yeah, and to answer the question, succession planning is more of a framework or strategy for the business. How does that play into recruitment, retaining, and retraining? That should be the driving foundation towards the career growth opportunities that exist for people within the business. And so giving people those career growth opportunities are clear indicators or clear benefits towards recruiting and retaining individuals, but you've got to have that succession planning strategy in place in order to drive the behaviors of individuals within the organization.
Yeah, I've when I was previous head of HR, I'll tell you the thing that made me not sleep at night was being fearful that in a small company, it was only about 100 people, being fearful that 10 people would resign next week and I would be in a bed. That really kept me up. So I was able to develop like an integrated succession planning and career growth opportunity. So it actually made me a lot more comfortable. But I think you need to consistently look at talent throughout the organization all the time. And it's not just employees, it's executives too, as we know, right? Sometimes new executives to, need to be placed in a organization. So I think that's really, really, really important. So.
Great, thanks everyone. We had another question come in from the Q&A. And I will post this in the chat for visibility. Our organization is in the media industry, and we recently transitioned our workforce into 3 different locations. The culture has been tremendously effective by this transition, and employees are a bit disengaged. How would you recommend that the company pivot during challenging times like these to continue to keep staff engaged while separated?
That might lead well to the next question, where we talk a bit about flexible work environment, shift out of brick and mortar. Do we want to maybe have that topic and then see if we answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last question we'll cover, and we are open to more Q&A questions for the remaining time. So the last question is the dynamic that employers are dealing with today with the big shift out of brick and mortar to a more flexible work environment, and how is it related to the pre-recession? Luke, do you want to share some context on your time at Reltio?
Yeah, I'll be kind of quick, so I'm sure David may have a little more to say. But when I joined Reltio, we actually started out as all virtual, so we didn't have to unfortunately go through this. But my opinion in digital transformation, the cat's out of the bag. I don't think we're ever going to go back to a full. Most companies aren't never going to go back to a full on-site transformation, but I do like this hybrid model where you have certain locations where people can meet up or spend time together, because we are seeing from our employees that they do miss seeing teammates. But I'm not quite sure we'll ever go back to fully on-site. Is my personal opinion.
Yeah, when you talk about the ways, and to answer this question that just came in, is people are starting to get disengaged or demotivated. They're the environment is either changed or the expectation has shifted. And as you have people in different environments, that can happen. I think it's a really important topic, but I do think it's another topic that a lot of companies are addressing out of fear, or not addressing for that matter. Fear that they make the wrong call, fear that they'll upset the employee apple cart. It's an interesting time that this business changing decision surfaced during one of the most talent competitive times of our lifetime. And that dynamic probably added to the fear. But I think businesses need to make the decision on how to address their future of work based on their business needs, but not ignoring their employee sentiment. And kind of hear what I said there. I said their employee sentiment, not what the media is telling you, that all employees want to work from home or that only remote companies can hire great people. Like, I don't think that's the answer for every company. Let your current employees know what it will take for your business to be successful, how they can thrive in that environment, and then partner with your people to develop the right plan on how to enhance communication, on how to digitally transform your business to keep people connected. Partner with them, but it does have to be a business-led decision in order for the business to be successful. Last night, I was with a friend who told me about a colleague who worked for a small sustainability consulting firm. They were doing really well, and this company prioritized what they called employee preferences over everything, including client needs, which included no in-person work needed for their employees. For many people, they like that environment, right? But this person was super passionate about making kind of this huge difference in the sustainability space. And they believed that the only way to do it would be coming together, clear alignment in partnership with all parties. So they read a job post that said something in the lines of, do you want to be on the front lines and in the trenches? Do you want to work in the field with clients that are truly passionate about making difference? Do you want to be on the road, in person with difference makers, blah, 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 et cetera. They left a small firm to find a job that was better aligned with their values, even though it meant kind of no more cushy work from home lifestyle. So my whole kind of thought when I was hearing the story is that there are talented people out there that will work in the way you and your business needs them to work, but you have to be open, honest, and transparent about kind of the what, how, and why of that business, and then make sure that they serve a true purpose within your company. So just try to connect the dots in that way. That might have been a bigger story than we needed, but.
Well, I think it's also going back to the question, right, where they were all together, and then now they have 3 different locations. I think it goes back to what, David, you and I've been saying from the beginning, listen to your employees. We have multiple locations across the globe. And I can tell you, when we surveyed our employees, one location had an 80 to 90% rate of wanting to get back into the office. Like they had, they were turning people away. They had 100, or more people wanting to get into the office every day. And then, the office that I work out of, it was, no, I'm fine. I'll just work from home all the time. And so it's really, you have to listen to those different locations. What do they want? And it's okay to have different strategies for different locations. That's okay. Yeah, we find ways to bring people together. The other thing that we heard from our employees is, don't make me come in just to come in. Like, don't do roll call at the office. Have a purpose for me to come in and collaborate, right? Make it a purposeful meeting. And then also make time for those social gatherings as well, I think is equally important. Don't come together just for work, but couple it with some social interactivity as well.
At my previous company, we had some kind of adopters of in-person work or in-person collaboration. And there's a software engineer, individual contributor software engineer that was kind of leading the charge for his team, pretty big team, about 100 people in the Chicagoland area. And he's become like this social media advocate. He worked from home, by the way, for past 2 years. And he's become this social media advocate of what it's like to have lunch in a restaurant of downtown Chicago, something he hasn't done with friends, by the way, he hasn't done in 2 years, of what it's like to go out after work and walk the lakefront and get that fresh air versus sitting in his apartment. He's just become this advocate, and it's not for everyone, but he's being able to help people see the benefit that he's experienced with the idea of encouraging others to give it a shot, even though it might be uncomfortable after a few years.
Yeah.
Great, thanks everyone. And we're a little short on time, so I'd like to give a very special thank you to our panelists for such a rich discussion. Feel free to scan their QR code to connect with them on LinkedIn. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for our past events, including the Halo series, where we feature thought leaders in a one-on-one setting as they discuss what is keeping them up at night. And then thank you everyone for attending. We will be sharing a short survey with some follow-up questions, and we will have an uploaded version to YouTube very soon. And we look forward to seeing everyone at our next event, and I hope everyone has a great week.
Thank you, Douglas and team. Everyone have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.